On a weekday afternoon in September of 2012, I was driving along the highway on my way into Toronto. And as you come into the city, there's a point where the highway splits into two. You either stick to the left and you get into the city staying on the highway, or you stick to the right. You come into the city through more of the scenic route that takes you along the lake. And dividing the road was a fresh concrete median that had not been there before. Although I have fond childhood memories of this stretch of highway because it's actually a stone's throw away from where I grew up, that day, as I saw that divider on the horizon for the first time, I decided I was not going to go neither left nor right. I decided I was going to drive my car head into the concrete median. This was not planned or premeditated. This decision didn't even come from like a voice in my head. It wasn't a conscious decision where some dialogue was going back and forth where I could simply, debate it. It was a decision made from a part of my body that delivered it with just so much certainty that questioning it didn't even come up as a possibility. It didn't even cross my mind. What followed that decision wasn't thoughts of those that would miss me or those who I would miss, but instead a huge wave of relief that this would all soon be over. Along with an intense kind of sense of peace that, you'd assume that somebody who is planning to take their life, that they would be very emotional and very irrational when making that decision. But for me, it wasn't the case at all. Again, there was this weird, calm sense of peace that I don't think I've ever felt up until that point, and have I ever kind of felt since. And as I drove towards that concrete median, I remember glancing down at the steering wheel and looking at the word airbag in its very distinct font. And I remember thinking to myself, with my shitty luck, this airbag will save my life, which would ultimately mean that not only have I failed as a father, as a husband, and as an entrepreneur, but I failed at killing myself as well. With a few seconds to spare, I decided to kind of stick left, and then I pulled over to kind of regroup and assess what had just happened. The extent of my struggle during this time of my life isn't something I've really shared publicly. In full transparency, I've never fully understood the notion of depression, let alone suicide. I mean, it's something I still have judgment towards to this day. But I remember sitting in a room, well, two things. One is I know statistically entrepreneurs struggle with depression at a 30% higher rate than the general population. And then I remember sitting in a room probably about 2 years ago with about 12 to 14 entrepreneurs, and somebody in the room, we were talking about some deeper type stuff, and somebody in the room said, has anybody here thought about ending their life at one point in time? And these are all kind of veteran entrepreneurs. Every single person in the room raised their hand. Like I said, I still don't understand it. I still have judgment towards it, but regardless, it's safe to say that I was in a very dark place at the time. To this day, when I see tire marks on a concrete median or a divider, it makes me wonder if those tire marks have a story. A year prior to this, I was living what most would consider, I guess you could say, the dream. I was seen by many as to be very kind of successful by both my peers and the media. However, my dreams had become nightmares on some level. As I started to kind of climb up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I started to ask myself questions like, why am I here? Will I be remembered? How many people show up to my funeral? And I was not happy with the answers I was giving myself. I had followed the common, entrepreneur gospel that I need to pick a business based on opportunity and proximity. How could I make the most amount of money as quickly as possible? And how could I scale something so that one day I could sell it for a large sum of money and sip pina coladas on the beach? I don't drink, but I'm like, there's no better time to start than once you sell your business, I guess. So in 2011, 6 years into my entrepreneurial journey, I was earning 22 times the national average Canadian income. And in most business circles, that would be celebrated. But for me, I wasn't 22 times happier than the average male. I wasn't 22 times healthier. When I was 23, I had kidney complications because of stress, because of a failed business partnership. So I learned the hard way that money and happiness scale very differently. And I came to the stark realization that I'd built a business I hated to enable me to buy things I didn't need, to impress people I didn't like. And the heaviness of success left me yearning to be a beginner again. And once I came to that discovery, I knew I couldn't keep on that path. I had to be willing to sacrifice who I was for who I wanted to become. And that as long as I had a plan B, which was a business that met all my wants and needs financially, I could never follow through with plan A, which was to find a business that would truly energize me on every level. Now, even though my business at the time was very profitable, it wasn't poised for acquisition. In order to get it to that point, I would have to stay engaged for many more months, if not maybe a year or two, which was simply something I couldn't do to myself. I didn't like the business. I didn't like the people we served. It was such a pain point for me that I started to sabotage money-making opportunities so that I wouldn't have to deal with customers. I wouldn't return calls. I wouldn't return order emails. Continuing to stay in business would have just driven me absolutely crazy, and that was simply not an option. So I made a conscious decision to scale that business down, and the end goal was to have just a little bit of money left in the bank so I could start something new. At least that was the plan. But the perfect storm ensued over the following year. And I always say it was like the death of 1,000 paper cuts. First, we had a bank call our loan, which really inhibited us from buying more inventory, at least in bulk, at the rate that we were doing up until that point. And then shortly after, it was probably like 2 weeks after that, our merchant services provider decided to eliminate our cash flow, like 98% of our cash flow, by placing our account on 100% reserve status. Basically, they gave us a call on like a Friday, and they said, whoever assessed your account years ago when you were at a certain size of business assessed it wrong, and we don't have enough money in the reserve account. So because of that, we need to basically put 100% reserve. So everything you charge through your terminals is going to go into a, trust account of sorts. And once you decide to basically close your merchant services account with us, you have to wait 6 months, and then you'll have access to that money. I mean, it was a tough time. And because my heart was no longer in the business, I started to detach myself from it. And my staff, who were kind of all aware of their fate, started to get sloppy. Waste and inefficiencies kind of grew exponentially over time. And, they were spending a small portion of their time working and the remainder of their time socializing and looking for other opportunities. And I'm certain there was probably some internal theft in there as well, but I didn't care. I just wanted out. And getting out, I did. That day, I sat on the side of the road, $250,000 in debt with no business, no cash flow, no savings. I was bankrupt on every level, emotionally, spiritually, financially, even physically, because up until that point, I had built the business at the expense of my health, and I put on over 70 pounds. Add to the fact that I just moved to a town that I didn't like, entered a marriage I wasn't ready for, and was having an incredibly hard time adjusting to being a father to my 6-month-old daughter. I felt alone. I felt confused. I felt empty, and I definitely did not see light at the end of the tunnel. However, I've since learned that failure can be a beautiful thing. Failure strips away the inessential. And had I really succeeded in my first business, I might have never found the determination to succeed in the one arena where I truly believed I belonged. When that business tanked, on some level I was set free, and my greatest fear had already been realized, and I was somewhat still alive, right? So rock bottom for me became a solid foundation upon which I rebuilt my life. Now, fast forward to today, my life is thankfully virtually unrecognizable from what it was only a few short years ago. And I share this because everyone lives a story. Some stories are examples, while others are warnings. I've been both a father and a husband for over 5 years, and I've been an entrepreneur for over 14 years. It hasn't been an easy road, and I'm going to continue to learn from this point forward as well. But Charlie Munger, who's the right-hand man to Warren Buffett, always said that everyone learns from experience, but I rather learn from the experience of others. So my hope is that by listening to Community Made, you'll be able to learn from my experiences, as well as the experiences of some of my most successful entrepreneurial friends. And my commitment to you as a listener is to be fully transparent when it comes to my thoughts, my fears, and my philosophies pertaining to business and life, so that you can leverage the things I've done well and avoid the things I haven't. Now, I've been blessed with many mentors over the years who've saved me from breakdowns and bankruptcies and probably a few divorces. So I see this as an opportunity to send the elevator back down, as Kevin Spacey would say. So without further ado, I bring you the Community Made podcast. If this is your first time hearing my voice, welcome. If you're a loyal listener of my previous podcast, Mastermind Talks, then welcome back. So why Community Made? Let me start there. Why is it worthy of your time when there's so many other podcasts out there? Well, first, the term Community Made was given to me by a good friend of mine named Zach Anner. I brought Zach in to open our last event, MMT Carmel, for the simple reason that everyone comes to a live experience like MMT in order to build deep and authentic relationships with other fascinating entrepreneurs. However, they often struggle asking for help when they truly need it, and I am very guilty of this myself. So Zach is a YouTube personality with cerebral palsy, and when sharing his message from the stage on how he simply wouldn't be able to do what he does on his own, he delivered a line that wrapped up everything just beautifully when he said, "I'm not self-made, I'm community-made." And ultimately, we all are, because nobody, I promise you, nobody does it alone. As for what makes this podcast different, let's be honest, podcasting is a very noisy platform at the moment. So there's many great shows out there to choose from. When I started podcasting initially, Tim Ferriss didn't have his show. How I Built This wasn't around. James Altucher didn't have his multiple shows. The Art of Charm was around. Mixergy was around. All of those are fantastic podcasts. They're all friends of mine, but it's a noisy platform. And the side benefit to that is that there's, in essence, almost a podcast for everyone, no matter what you're into. But I didn't want to come back with simply another interview show. I'm a firm believer that attention is the new currency, and this podcast may be free to you on some level, but you're paying for it with attention, and attention is in very high demand in today's day and age. An hour of you listening to the podcast is something I do not take for granted by any stretch. I had no desire to get back into this unless I offered something truly different and unique. With that said, I've decided to launch this podcast season by season, each one with a different theme. This means that I can free myself from that content production hamster wheel that a lot of podcasters fall into, where they'll sacrifice quality for the sake of putting 2 or 3 episodes out a week. And for you as a listener, you can binge listen if that's your thing. This also means I can take a really deep dive into each theme every season, and I plan to go deep down the rabbit hole when it comes to a wide range of topics, from scaling your business to parenting as an entrepreneur. Seasons will have a mix of solo episodes, exclusive talks from the MMT library, so from folks like 4-time New York Times bestselling author Tim Ferriss, social media maven Gary Vaynerchuk, legendary supermensch himself, Shep Gordon, and we'll also have a style of episode I'm really, really excited about, which are these intimate conversations with inspiring entrepreneurial friends of mine, where you can kind of feel like you're part of the conversation. Now, I think of this podcast almost like an all-access pass into the lessons, the learnings, the insights, and the wisdom of some of the world's most successful entrepreneurs, people who are not only winning in business, but winning in life as well. There's a saying that an entrepreneur is somebody who goes from working in their business to on their business, but there's this second tier of entrepreneur that goes from working on their business to working on themselves. And that's who this podcast is for. Entrepreneurs who know that good is the enemy of great in all areas of their life, and they have a strong desire to build a great business, but they don't want to do it at the expense of their relationship with their spouse, or the expense of the relationship with their kids, or their health and well-being. So if you subscribe to this, then Community Made was designed with you in mind. Ladies and gentlemen, I am beyond excited to share what we have in store for you this season. So I will see you on episode 1.